What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Fantasy Flavor Podcast, where we spicing up your daily dose of fantasy football content. So here I am once again with a little special segment here. Hopefully with a better mic. I have my fingers like 100% crossed here. We'll see. We're gonna do our first one-on-one interview series here, which is where I or another Fantasy Flavor content creator goes in depth with a person of the fantasy football community, and we're just going to talk about stuff they think, a little bit about themselves, give them some publicity. Even though we don't have much publicity to give, hopefully one day we will, and that comes down to just trying to be ourselves and stuff like that. So moving on here, I have Drew Osinchuk here. He is a writer for, I believe, Player Profile, and he does some great Twitter work too. He has a really interesting series on Twitter that I personally liked, and that's how I ended up following him, called The Bulletproof Prospect. Kind of these Twitter threads, and we're going to talk about a little bit more about that. We're going to talk a little bit about players he's high on, Andy Isabella, Derrick Henry in the Titans offense, which is a little shocking, Leonard Fournette. We're also going to be talking about some of the players he's more lower on, like the Denver Broncos backfield, Mike Gesicki, Mike Williams, all the mics. So I hope you guys stay tuned, and we're going to have a great time here. So how are you doing today, Drew?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you for coming on. Probably a little earlier for you compared to me, but I'm always appreciative, especially during a weekday. So thank you for spending time here with me. So I appreciate it.
Good.
All right, so I want to just learn a little bit more about yourself for the audience and for myself. We've talked a little bit, 15, 20 minutes here, but I just kind of want to know, why do you like fantasy football so much?
I don't know. It's fun. There's
That's
a million layers to dig through. It's complicated and it's rewarding to win. Everybody likes winning.
Really? I like coming in last place. No, no, I'm kidding. Yeah, so it seems like your content on your Twitter page, at least, is mainly Dynasty focused. So why do you like Dynasty fantasy football so much?
Like building things. You get to draft the players as rookies and keep them forever, or trade them, or do whatever you want with them. Basically, you build a team and you don't really ever get to hit reset like you would in redraft. So you need to be committed to whatever move you're choosing to make.
Yeah, for me, I like that too because I like investing in players long term. Like last year, I grabbed Saquon everywhere I could, and you best believe I'm feeling so good about myself about Saquon. Like he's gonna carry my fantasy teams, no matter how bad they are. Hopefully, I'll be pretty good here for at least the next decade. I'm a big Saquon fan, and I drafted him everywhere. I'm talking like top 3 overall picks, which was considered a reach at the time. So I definitely agree with you there. I like it because it's more realistic.
Yeah,
We
it's
talked a
rewarding to be able to pick that guy that nobody else wants, and then he turns into something. Like guys like Tyler Boyd or Devontae Adams, those types.
Yeah, 100%. I grabbed Boyd recently in the 6th round of a startup, and I love that pick because he has the profile just for a really successful player. Speaking of Tyler Boyd here, so I'm super excited about that. He can definitely transition maybe into a number 1, even though his points kind of went down. I'm hoping he'll kind of grow, especially with the better offense. He was super impressive considering how bad the Bengals offense really was, especially since he produced without Andy Dalton pretty okay. So.
Yeah, he did really well last year.
100%. But you probably like Tyler Boyd, right, for your fantasy team, but you don't like him because you're a Steelers fan. And I want everyone just to understand how committed this guy is against his bias. He never really owns any Steelers. Can you talk about why that kind of happened?
I just always pick the other guy when I'm choosing between a Steeler or not. It seems like it's really easy to fall into favorite team bias, and I just prefer not to deal with that.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm a Patriots fan. I lived in Massachusetts, so you probably don't like me now. But I'm going to try to redeem myself here. So, especially Patriots football in my homer leagues, I had Chris Hogan go in the 2nd round of a redraft league. 2nd round over a whole bunch of names you wouldn't expect. So it's awesome that you don't fall for that bias. I like to pride myself in not falling into that bias either. But then again, N'Keal Harry went to New England, and I pressed the gas harder on N'Keal 101 than maybe anyone you've ever met. I am so dang adamant because he was my 101 pre-draft. So I didn't expect the Patriots to grab my 101 pre-draft. You can already imagine how much I loved him. So
Absolutely.
Overall, I got to give credit there to you. We also talked a little earlier about how you write for Player Profiler. Can you talk a little bit about that experience for you, why you decided for Player Profiler, stuff like that?
Basically, I really like the content on the website and messaged Matt with a question, and he asked me if I'd like to write an article on it, and I said, sure. And I wrote one article, and I didn't write anything else for another year. Then I noticed there was no mock drafts on the website, so then I started writing some mock draft articles. And it just kind of snowballed, and then I built this like an ADP database based on Dynasty League Football's ADPs, where I track every draft class based on their May ADP versus the next year, the same player's May ADP, so on and so forth, to look for trends. And then I came up with a few article ideas out of that and kept going.
Yeah, I think that's super duper cool here. And I want to do something super fun here because this just ended up happening. So I just got a notification on the phone that I'm on the clock here in one of my leagues I'm drafting here for Dynasty Superflex League PPR. And I kind of want to, this is off the moment, hopefully you're okay with this. I kind of want to break down and try to get your advice here of who I should pick. Are you down for that?
Is it a rookie draft or a startup?
It's a startup, so we'll have some options here to go through. But I thought this would be pretty fun to go through here, so.
Sounds good, let's do it.
So looking at my team right now, I have Christian McCaffrey, Travis Kelce, T.Y. Hilton, Darius Geis, Rashad Penny, Tyler Boyd, Jared Goff, DK Metcalf, Josh Allen. I just grabbed Anthony Miller, which I wasn't in love with, but I was hanging out with my friend at the time who is a big Anthony Miller fan. So I even let him press the draft button for me. So looking at some players here who are on the board, we have Jerick McKinnon, Matt Breida, Ronald Jones, which I already know you're going to say no to, Ito Smith, Deontay Foreman. So pretty bad on the running backs. For wide receivers, we have Michael Gallup, Kiki Cutie, Arcega Whiteside, Washington, Traquan Smith, Deshaun Hamilton, Valdez Scantling, Devin Funchess. Just guys like that. I already have a tight end, so Kelsey, so I don't even want to look at tight ends. And for quarterbacks, there's a Brady, Carr, Rosen, Dalton, Foles. So pretty much, and then I believe Haskins was just taken. So probably Daniel Jones is the only good quarterback left there. So, is there any names that I just mentioned that kind of interest you?
No.
Yeah,
Did you take rookie picks? Or are the rookies included?
Yeah, the rookies are included here. So, as for rookies, hold on. There's this wonderful rookie filter button here. It's Whiteside, Butler, Deontay Johnson.
You take Isabella?
Isabella's gone. I know you're a big Isabella. Wait. Isabella has to be gone. Hold on. Let me search. Excuse my keyboard here. No, Isabella's gone. I'm sorry to break your heart, because that would have just been the pick right there. I already know how big of an Isabella guy you are. Right. He was picked 3 spots before I'm picking, so.
Is it tight end premium?
No, it's just regular. So, it's really
Traquan or Jerick McKinnon are probably the ones that stood out the most to me.
Yeah.
Or a quarterback. You only have one quarterback, right?
I have 2. I have Allen and Goff. But probably by the time it's my pick next, maybe all of them will be gone. And I probably need a quarterback 3 just in case of injury.
Yeah,
because I am running Josh Allen.
I'd take a quarterback here.
So out of the quarterbacks, we have Rosen, who you're low on. We have Dalton, Nick Foles, Derek Carr, and Tom Brady. So
I'd take either Carr or Dalton.
Carr and Dalton. Interesting. You're low on Nick Foles.
I'm very low on Nick Foles.
Would you take the greatest quarterback of all time, Daniel Jones, over any of those guys too? He's on the
No,
board.
I would not.
We have someone in our league who loves Daniel Jones to death. He'll never shut up about him, but we love him anyways. He's a big Daniel Jones guy. I think Jones is actually a value though, where he's going in Superflex leagues. He's going super late. So.
I mean, if you think you can trade Daniel Jones for something worthwhile, then I'd do that.
Yeah.
But
no,
if you had to keep the player forever, I would take Derek Carr or Andy Dalton over.
Yeah. I'm just looking to see if there's anything else. It sucks Isabella went, because that would have transitioned well into a talk. Because you're really high on Isabella, which I think is pretty cool. Because he's kind of like a second round, late first, but you're like really high on him. How high would you take him in a rookie draft?
I kind of have a bit of a rule with ADPs. I basically drafted ADP, and if I can't get the player I want because he's too low, then I just trade back.
Yeah, that's fair too.
So like, I think he's my 6th rated player, but I'm never taking him at 6. I've taken him at 11 several times. The earliest I've taken him.
Yeah. So I'm going to draft Derek Carr here. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I would grab McKinnon, but I don't know. That's a freaking shit show in freaking San Francisco. It's so bad.
Yeah, I just take Derek Carr. The quarterbacks are going to be way more trade value down the road.
Yeah.
And you may not get another starter depending on what happens in the next round of your start.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I appreciate that help. Totally using my resources here to my advantage. Whoops. No, just kidding. But I kind of want to end this player profiler kind of your writing gig here. I kind of want to know your opinion on Matt Kelly. What do you kind of think of the guy? Because some think he's absolutely mentally insane. Other thinks he's a little insane. Some think he belongs in an asylum. Some think he's a cool guy. So what do you think about Matt Kelly?
I think that Matt Kelly on mic and on Twitter is substantially different than Matt Kelly behind the scenes.
Yeah.
I think he's actually a pretty nice guy. I've had no issues with him.
Hey, I like his content, so I have no problem. As long as you're spewing out good content, I don't really hold the person you are against you. But I bet it is kind of a persona, almost.
It's definitely a persona, without question. It's a persona.
He tweeted something. It was like a review, and he's like, someone was calling him like a Stephen A. Smith knockoff, and he got a hoot out of it. I got a hoot out of that too. That's just funny. Granted, Stephen A. Smith is one of the most popular, maybe not one of the most smartest, but one of the most popular, and popularity is pretty cool. So that's awesome. Moving on here, I want to talk a little bit about this Bulletproof series. I kind of want to break it down here. So when you mean Bulletproof series, do you Bulletproof kind of prospect series here? Do you mean like this player isn't going to bust, or what's the exact meaning of Bulletproof?
Yeah, that's more or less what it means. They're the players I feel the most confident will have fantasy relevance for the longest.
I just want to say something funny here. So I was arguing with somebody because somebody thought N'Keal Harry wasn't really the clear-cut wide receiver one on Reddit. So I had a Reddit argument because I'm dumb. I decided to have a Reddit argument. And I was pretty much strapped because I'm like, I'm not going to argue with you. And he was like, oh, wow, that's so lame, dude. And I got a whole bunch of downvotes there. So I'm like, I'm kind of trapped here. So I brought up your Bulletproof Prospect series, actually, and I linked it. And then, hold on, let me try to do an imitation of how I imagine this guy is sounding when he responded to me. No player is bulletproof. Anybody can get injured. So, so do you actually mean that you really don't expect these players to bust? Do you factor in injury too? Because he's right. Technically, any player can get injured and just kind of suck. So, how do you factor in injuries with the Bulletproof Prospect series?
Kind of. I mean, basically, what I look at is, are they? I believe I called it like NFL sized, and a lot of people ask me about Andy Isabella being NFL sized because he's only 5'9", and I said, well, I'm actually looking more at like are players his size successful in the NFL. And Isabella has a couple pretty solid comps in T.Y. Hilton and Brandon Cooks. They're all virtually the same size. They all run the same 40, and they were all wildly productive in college. So it's kind of like, well, it's like this path has already been paved. He's following in these guys' footsteps that are already successful. So when it comes to injuries, I'm looking at, are they big enough to play in the NFL? I'm not interested in guys that are like very low BMI players. Like, for example, Kerryon Johnson is a pretty low BMI player. I didn't really like him because I felt like he was too small to handle NFL workload. Same thing with Christian McCaffrey, though Christian McCaffrey I felt more comfortable with just because he was a lot more productive in the passing game, and I felt like he could be fantasy relevant whether or not he could handle the big workload. But anyway, so do I consider injuries? Yes and no. If a player is injured frequently, when I look at their production on a market share basis, it's going to be low. Like DK Metcalf, for example. His production is really, really low because he didn't play enough games to have a large market share. So I basically write him off because he wasn't productive, but he may not have been productive because he was injured. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think definitely the problem with statistics, and it seems like you're a very statistical guy, is there's not only outliers, there's also all these other, I believe they're called confounding variables, if I remember my statistics senior class, right? Where you kind of just can't control all these variables. So it's kind of hard, for example, for DK Metcalf to project that production because he wasn't on the field. He looked good when he was on the field, especially his last year. Someone who is my wide receiver 2 in rookie drafts, which you may not like. And that's not because I'm happy about it. That's because I am terribly low on everybody else and just looked on the big board there. But overall, I think that's something really interesting. Talking about the Bulletproof Prospect Series, do you have like a success rate on these players? I don't know how long you've been doing them, but like what's kind of the success rate? Do you have a success rate? What's the track record with the Bulletproof Prospect Series?
Well, this is the first year I've actually called it Bulletproof Prospects, and I never used market share of yards before for my production thresholds. I always used College Dominator, which you can find on the any player page on Player Profiler. Market share of yards is something I just found this year, and I really like it. It's I feel like College Dominator it takes into consideration percentage of touchdowns and percentage of yards. And what I found was happening was that there were a lot of guys that were putting up big College Dominators that were not putting up big market share of yards. So it was looking like they were really good prospects like Corey Coleman, Josh Doctson, Devontae Parker, etc. But then when you look at their market share of only yards and you just take touchdowns completely out of the equation, they're really not productive. And then there was other guys like Odell Beckham Jr., Mike Evans, Juju Smith-Schuster, for example, that have mediocre College Dominators because they didn't put up a huge percentage of touchdowns in college. And I was discounting those guys because they didn't have high College Dominators, but then when you look up just their yardage, they are really impressive. So I didn't have access to that data set until this year. So it's kind of flipped.
That's interesting. I think it'd be cool if you could go back and kind of redo that to see who maybe wouldn't fall under this type of quote prospect series, who wouldn't. To clarify here for our viewers and myself, so this kind of like market share yards, which I can't pronounce for the life of me. So that's pretty much just a College Dominator rating, but removing touchdowns from the equation.
Yeah, the College Dominator rating takes the market share of yards and the market share of touchdowns and just melds them together as equal inputs. Basically, what I looked at was just get rid of the touchdowns. They're not sticky for the most part. When I just looked at the market share of yards, and then the other thing I started doing this year is looking at the market share of yards for each season in college. whereas I only ever looked at the College Dominator on Player Profilers. If I recall correctly, it's only their final year College Dominator or their best year. I think they use whichever one's higher.
Okay.
So we're basically summing up every player's college production into one season. Now I'm looking at all 3 or 4 years of their college production versus the average top 36 wide receiver, what they did in college. So guys like N'Keal Harry shows incredibly well. Andy Isabella looks incredible, and AJ Brown looks incredible. But then you can do the same thing for tight ends, where you look at market share of yards again and again. When you do that for so when I was looking at this, I also looked at the past several drafts and to kind of like test it backwards, if that makes sense.
Okay.
The problem with that, though, is it's soaked in hindsight bias because we know what those players are now. So it looks like it's a really... when I look at the profiles, I'm like, oh yeah, I would have drafted that guy. But at the time, I don't know, maybe I wouldn't have. It's impossible to know.
Yeah, hindsight bias. Something you have to watch out for, 100%. So I've been looking overall, and just to clarify for our viewers, one, I recommend checking this out on his Twitter page, at DFBeanCounter. I believe it's pinned. I recently looked at it. It's pinned unless you change it on me. I swear to God, don't change it on me. I'm just messing.
It's pinned.
Yeah, keep it pinned because I think it's so great. It's great content. And the prospects on those, I believe, are Andy Isabella, AJ Brown, N'Keal Harry, and the 2 tight ends, TJ Hawkins and Noah Fant. Is there anybody else I'm missing?
Did you say Kyler?
Oh, Kyler Murray. Yeah, who could forget? Kyler Murray, 101 Superflex, right? So,
absolutely.
Yeah. So you have 6, but I noticed one thing. I was kind of like, people have like this RB addiction. It's like, I don't know. It's like drugs almost to people. Like, people gotta have the next hottest RB, but you didn't have any kind of bulletproof, 100% kind of surefire power like running back. So, were there any running backs close? What are your thoughts on just the whole running back class in this case?
I actually did a bit of a series on, I call them maybe prospects. They're guys that I'd buy into if they had early success, because I think there are indications that they could be good, but I'm not confident that they're going to be good. And I had Josh Jacobs and Miles Sanders and David Montgomery all on that list. So I think there's potential there. They're nowhere near surefire hits to me.
So I have 2 questions there for you. Speaking of these running backs, this is what people are, here for. How would you rank those 3 running backs, and where would you take them in a rookie draft?
I would actually pick them in the order that they were drafted in the NFL draft, not because of their draft capital, just because that was how I like them. But Jacobs, then Sanders, then David Montgomery.
That's fair. Maybe the biggest debate we've had here so far on the podcast is David Montgomery versus Miles Sanders. And you're actually the first one here to tell our viewers here that Miles Sanders is over David Montgomery. Is there any reason why?
Well, David Montgomery. So like one of the other things I look at when I'm doing the Bulletproof Prospect series is kind of like draft capital indicators. So like first round running backs have really, really high hit rates for multiple year starters in fantasy. Second round running backs have pretty good, and third round running backs have okay, and then basically day 3 picks are worthless. They're nothing. So when I have the players ranked pretty equally, then I look at draft capital, and I look at kind of like the likelihood that they'll have multi-year. So like one of the other things I'm looking for is multi-year starters. I don't want one-hit wonders. I don't want players that I can pick for 1 year, hope that they do well, and then trade later. So in this case, I liked Josh Jacobs because his yards created was really well. But he scored really well in Gray Barfield's yards created. I liked his size, and I liked his pass catching out of college. The concerns were that he was playing. He basically had no college dominator rating, he was really not productive on a market share basis, other than in receiving yards.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at that, then it's like, well, he was playing with other high quality players, even though I don't really like any of the other players he was playing with. I'm not high on, I forget the guy's name now, third rounder for the...
Damian Harris?
Yeah, Damian Harris. He's someone I don't think will have longevity in fantasy. So it's kind of like, he got beat out by a guy I don't really like. That's kind of weird.
Yeah.
And then we go to Miles Sanders and David Montgomery. David Montgomery just is like a really questionable NFL athlete. That was the big hang-up for me with him. His athleticism scores were very poor, whereas Sanders was quite high. And then when you look at competition for backfield touches, I felt like Montgomery has Terry Cohen, who I think is probably still going to have a pretty significant role, similar role to what he had last year. Whereas Miles Sanders is playing with guys I don't think are very good. So I feel like Sanders can take the job easier than Montgomery can take Cohen's passing work.
Yeah, that's fair. Certainly for all three of these rookie running backs, they're all kind of in potential committees. Jacobs being the one that's most clear, maybe not in a committee. But you never know with John Gruden there. Maybe he'll give Jalen Richard, who's a pretty good pass catcher in his own right, some work there. So I definitely had Miles Sanders before, but I've been really talking to Montgomery. So you helped me a little bit feel more confident about drafting Miles Sanders over Montgomery. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. So Drew, my question here for you is, would you rather take N'Keal Harry 101 in a startup rookie draft, talking about how high you are on him and his kind of bulletproof prospect kind of build, or would you rather take Jacobs because of the positional value?
I'm taking N'Keal Harry.
That's my boy right there. All right, got it.
I've done it in several drafts so far.
I have too. So now you definitely got to follow at DFBeanCounter there on Twitter, just because he said that, and totally backs up my opinion, because the other people here on the Fantasy Flavor podcast have Jacobs over them, and I say that's ludicrous, completely ludicrous. No bias at all.
Yeah.
I am serious, no bias at all. So
here's the thing. I like part of my research this year that I was doing the ADP database for was kind of the point of it was to find out which position was the optimal choice in which round. So I looked at year over year, like year one gains in ADP. I counted everyone as a boom or bust. If they gained 12 spots, I counted them as a boom. I counted them as a bust if they lost 12 spots. And if they just stayed within 12 spots, I counted them as the same. And then I did kind of compiled the boom, bust, and same rates. And first round wide receivers actually have a 46% boom rate over the past 10 years, whereas running backs have a 40% boom rate. There's actually a better chance that you hit a home run with a wide receiver in the first round, which I did not expect. I thought that wide receivers take time to develop, and therefore they're going to lose value, but they just don't, because everyone knows that they're going to take time to develop, is my theory on that. I think it's pretty safe theory.
Yeah, I think DJ Moore's value's gone up with not really that impressive of a rookie year, to be honest. That wasn't bad, but you know what I mean? Like, for someone drafted as like the first wide receiver, it wasn't good. So I think people are already factoring that in. So like, to be like, well, I got to take a running back first. Well, one, the wide receiver's going to have a longer, probably more consistent career, which is how come RB0 is kind of a strategy, because wide receivers normally, especially when with high air yards, are pretty consistent year to year there. So I agree with you on that point. That's awesome.
The one, like, the, I guess, counterpoint to that, though, is I do take running backs over wide receivers, typically, if they're bulletproof. Like, last year, I had, let me just tell you my rankings for last year.
All right.
I think you will understand where I'm coming from. So last year, in like the unbreakable bulletproof tier, I had Baker Mayfield, Saquon Barkley, Darius Geis, Rashad Penny, Nick Chubb, Sony Michel, DJ Moore, Christian Kirk. And I had DJ Moore and Christian Kirk ranked after all of the other players in that tier.
Yeah.
And that is primarily because if they're all bulletproof, I'd rather have the running back than the wide receiver. But when it comes to a lesser or a player I'm not as confident in, then I'm going to take the guy I'm just more confident in, which is why I own a ton of tight ends. Pretty well on my rosters the last few years, I took Evan Ingram and David Njoku religiously, and I took Hawkinson and Fant this year. I have them in almost every single league, it seems like. In some leagues, I have all 4 of those tight ends.
I want to clarify. I agree with you, but I think in this class, all the running backs honestly have a pretty decent chance to bust, honestly. And Harry, I honestly have him higher than DJ Moore coming out. Corey Davis are pretty similar. Corey Davis' hype was freaking extreme after he got picked 5th overall. So I agree with you. Just in this class, I'm so low on like everybody but like the top 4 guys. Like people were talking about like trading back the 2020 picks, and I'm like, I agree with that. But if you have like one of those higher picks, you're probably getting like the only like really good players in this class to have the upside and probably, hopefully, the floor you want there too. Otherwise, there's going to obviously be like the tight ends, for example, people who hit, they may not hit immediately. I feel like you're buying lottery tickets after the 3 running backs, Harry, and the tight ends at least. I know you like Isabella. I'm a little more weary, especially because they have Hakeem Bustler, as Matt Kelly likes to call him. And they still have Christian Kirk, who we really like too. So I can't put him that high as well. Kyler Murray, I like in Superflex. I have no problem with 101 there. But overall for me, I think Harry is 101 for people because of just how safe he is and how kind of bad the rest of this class is. It's not terrible. There's obviously going to be people who hit, but it's just kind of like almost like a landmine almost. And sometimes you'll hit, sometimes you'll like really bust on an early pick. So
yeah, I recently saw, I think it was Jacob Rickroad had tweeted out basically how many guys have like 2 or more fantasy starter seasons per draft class, and it's like 5 or 6 guys. So we're not dealing with a lot of guys that are actually going to be fantasy relevant, or fantasy starters rather, for multiple years.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, makes sense because it's not like, you know, if Julio Jones is a starter for 10 years, well, nobody else can move into his spot. So there can only be so many guys that become starters, right? So when I was kind of looking at that, it was just like, well, why am I even drafting these guys that don't have high success rates historically? Like, what's the point? So in one league, if, for example, I had the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th overall picks, and I ended up trading back to, I forget, 6, 8, and 10 or something like that. And instead of taking those 3 running backs, I took N'Keal Harry, and then I traded back from 3 and 4, picked up 6 and 8, and took TJ Hawkinson and Noah Fant. And then picked up 2nd-round picks in 2020 as well, because I just didn't want the running backs. I just don't think they're going to have long careers.
That makes sense. And Jacobs has his injury concerns too, so I agree with that here, 100%. But we're kind of talking about kind of these running backs, and I just brought up Josh Jacobs and his injury. But I kind of want to move into players that you're high on, kind of outside the rookies, because we've had so much rookie talk already on the podcast. When you haven't been here, and you gave some great insight that us 3 never really contributed. So I want to thank you for that. But I want to talk about Leonard Fournette. Why are you like high on this guy? Like I am too, but I want to hear it from like your mouth, your perspective. Why should people go out and buy Leonard Fournette?
Well, he was bulletproof as a prospect. He was absolutely unstoppable in college. He had substantially more receiving prowess than anyone gave him credit for. Maybe not prowess, but production in college than anyone gave him credit for. Then he got to the NFL, and in his rookie year, he was productive in a terrible situation. They were one of the most predictable teams in the league, basically just handing it to him over and over again. And then he actually has been very productive as a receiver in the NFL as well. He averages something like 2.6 receptions a game or something around there. can't remember the exact number, but if he played a full season, he'd be on pace for about 40 receptions, which is definitely enough to be a very high-end running back one. Then, when you factor in that, the reason that he's not viewed as a first-round startup pick anymore is because he was hurt again. And at the end of the day, all running backs get hurt. All players get hurt, but all running backs get hurt. So it's like, okay, I know he's going to get hurt, but I also know that every other running back is probably going to get hurt too. So how much more likely is he to get hurt than anyone else? And I just don't think it's that much. And then when you go to sports injury predictor, they have him as a moderate injury risk. They're the guys who study injuries, and they don't think he's a high injury risk. So I don't either.
Yeah. With Fournette, I've heard some doctors and they talk about like the long term kind of like the ankle, they're kind of fading, and I take fantasy doctors very seriously because I drafted Leonard Fournette earlier, and he busted. Let's not joke around. I drafted Dalvin Cook high too. He busted. So I think the medical is important. But I think really Leonard Fournette is going to outproduce his ADP, even if it's like 12 games he plays. Because Melvin Gordon averages around, if you factor in Fournette's college years, like they average around the same games kind of played. And what is Gordon like consensus like RB5, just out of that second tier, just only because he's injury prone. So Leonard Fournette showed us he can produce at an elite level. The yards per carry has been really the only thing. And similarly to Melvin Gordon, I think these two are pretty similar because each year they come in and they catch more passes, and we've seen Melvin Gordon finally break out here, playing, 14, 13 games or whatever, but he had his high yards per carry finally, so people would shut up about that. And I think Leonard Fournette could have a similar bounce-back year to not Melvin Gordon's year this year, but his year kind of prior. What do you think about kind of, not necessarily the talent comparison, but maybe like the career arc comparison? What do you think about that?
Yeah, to an extent, I think that makes sense. Like with my ADP research, though, Melvin Gordon is like one of the only first-round picks that busted in his first year, like for ADP-wise, busted in his first year that recovered. Leonard Fournette gained a ton of value. Well, not a ton because he started so high, but he gained value in his first year, which is a very good sign. He gained a full round of ADP after his rookie year.
Wow.
So,
yeah,
he's like, he came into the league with high expectations, then he met those expectations. And then last year, he got hurt, and he missed a bunch of games, and he got suspended, and then the Jaguars revoked his guarantees, and so on and so forth. And people have just been piling on for no reason, in my opinion. He's done everything that he's been asked to do on the field. And the only question that I really had about him was, can he catch passes in the NFL? And he has absolutely caught passes in the NFL. So I just, like I said, all running backs get hurt. So why are we talking this guy for getting hurt? For example, Alshon Jeffrey was continually labeled as injury prone. And I was just looking at it the other day. He's actually only missed 2.5 games a season his whole career. Like per year, he's averaged 2.5 games missed per season. I can live with that. And I feel like Fournette, like if he plays a full season next year, he's only missed like 3 games a year his whole career. Like it's overblown.
Yeah, 100%. It is kind of overblown. Granted, I do think there's long-term concern, but for me, what I'm doing with Fournette, at least here, is I'm buying, and then I'm going to sell mid-season before he gets injured again. Maybe after the year, maybe he plays 14, 15 games. I'm going to sell him high and buy him low. That's perfect what you do here. He's kind of a post-type guy because people hyped him up. He lost a little bit of weight, I think, and everyone was like, oh my God, we can finally get into here with Leonard Fournette. He's going to be a top 3 running back, blah, 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 blah. Just all the hype disintegrated. Now no one wants him. So I'm like, I'll take him as my RB2, RB3. So.
Oh, yeah, I've been buying him everywhere I can this year. I had maybe one share of him, and now I have him in probably half my leagues, if not more.
Yeah, 100%. The next guy here I want to talk about just kind of in general here, this is going to be a little more general here, is Derrick Henry and kind of the whole Titans offense you're high on. Obviously, you were high on A.J. Brown, one of your bulletproof guys. I'm going to assume maybe we're probably high-ish, at least on Corey Davis, so it's kind of hard to be necessarily low on Corey Davis. As well as you could have been a Mariota fan. It sounds like you may be. The Titans did do a lot. They added Adam Humphries. They improved the offensive line, improved the defense slightly, so that could always be good for specifically Derrick Henry. So can you talk about why should I believe in the Titans offense? This looked miserable, and they maybe got even an arguable downgrade in coaching staff with LaFleur out. Why should I buy into this?
Basically, I like almost every player on the Titans offense. I think they've really been doing well with their drafting. They seem to really have embraced analytics, which I like. Corey Davis was absolutely bulletproof. Marcus Mariota was bulletproof. A.J. Brown is bulletproof. Derrick Henry wasn't bulletproof only because he didn't catch passes. Other than that, he's really good, though. One of the reasons I'm higher than maybe most on Tennessee is because I think Mariota is better than everyone is giving him credit for. I've gotten into several Twitter debates about whether or not Marcus Mariota will be the starting quarterback next, like in 2020 for the Titans. I don't think there's any possible way that he isn't. Seems simply like if you look at his efficiency stats, he's last year alone he was mediocre. Like he was middle of the pack in the NFL, and he said, and he had his arm problem. I can't remember what it's called now, but basically he couldn't feel his arm. I recall seeing a quote that he couldn't throw the ball like 20 yards downfield or something like that, and that happened in week 1. So if he was still a mediocre efficiency passer with not being able to throw the ball 20 yards downfield, how can you write him off? So once we look at Mariota, I think he's good. Corey Davis, I think is good. I think he had the 8th highest target share last year, which is crazy. But when you think about it, they really don't have anyone else. Taywan Taylor has proven not to be very good. Delaney Walker got hurt. Was it week 1 or week 2 or something last year? Or was it maybe even preseason? I can't remember. It was early in the season.
Yeah, week 1, I think.
And they just had no one to pass to other than Corey Davis, and they refused for whatever reason to give Derrick Henry the bulk of the carries. For some reason, they wanted to split it between Derrick Henry and Dion Lewis. And then when you look at Dion Lewis, he doesn't create any yards for himself. He basically gets whatever is blocked. Whereas Derrick Henry is one of the top players in yards created virtually every year in the NFL, and I don't remember what he was like in college, but I presume that's carried over from college.
Yeah.
So long story short, they were a very run-heavy team, which is very poor for efficiency. I think they're embracing analytics in the front office because they're picking all these analytics darling players. And then when you factor all that in, I have to think that's going to trickle down to the coaching staff at some point, and they're going to realize they need to pass the ball. Maybe it would have happened last year if Mariota didn't get hurt. They actually passed quite a bit in week 1 prior to his injury. So it's hard to know what they're thinking. But then when you look at their overall pass plays, they only had 437 last year, which is just silly low. Like, that's probably bottom 5 total in the past 5 years. They ran so few pass plays. Positive regression has to come.
Yeah, I agree. Positive regression should come. Let's hope it comes. It'd be cool to see Mariota succeed.
And with better with better
pass catching weapons. Definitely, Adam Humphries, kind of a slot specialist, right? A.J. Brown's pretty good. Could have won in the first round. You also have Corey Davis, top 5 overall pick. Personally, I'm a little lower on Brown's production. I think his real-life output, speaking of Mariota here at least, will help Mariota more than he'll actually put fantasy numbers up for your team. And just for me, that's partially because he's a guy that excelled in the slot. He can play outside. We saw it for 4 games in college. Granted, small sample size, whatever. He put up over 100 yards average there. But he kind of excels there in the slot, being a bigger-bodied guy. And those matchups are more valuable than probably going to be just played there at the Y. I assume this offense, just looking at it, it's going to be generic because Adam Humphries can only really play the slot. I believe he had over a 75% slot share last year in Tampa Bay. So I assume Corey Davis is just going to play the X. So my problem with A.J. Brown is I think he's a versatile weapon that excels in the slot, and I don't think he can do any of that. Granted, I still think he's good enough to produce some numbers, but I'm kind of fading him. He's like a late or first round pick for me, honestly. I just like other guys in their upside more. I don't see, for me, especially in rookie drafts, why I should take A.J. Brown.
Yeah, I think if you're going to pick A.J. Brown, you basically have to believe that something's going to change. Either the Titans decide to pass more, or they think that Mariota is the problem and they get a new quarterback and then they pass more. Like, they just can't see any way that they continue their current trend of run-pass ratio. And even if they do, I think their passing is going to be more efficient, which will lead to more plays overall anyway. But yeah, I don't, with the current state of how they're running the team, I don't think that they will have 2 starter caliber wide receivers on the team. I think that the team is going to be substantially more efficient, though, moving forward. I still wouldn't bet on anything for a. I don't think A.J. Brown's going to have a statistically impressive rookie season. I think he's going to impress in limited role, and hopefully in 2020 they will have a much better offense.
Hopefully. I mean, that's the hope. I hope it happens. But I kind of want to move away from the Titans here and talk about Rashad Penny of the Seattle Seahawks. He was someone I grabbed in, I think, the 4th round of my rookie startup 12-man league. And, well, I felt disappointed I traded him away earlier this offseason. And now you're going to explain to me, probably here, why I ask you your thoughts on Rashad Penny here. Why do you like him so much? And you're going to make me totally regret my trade, but go ahead. Tell me why I should have not traded away Rashad Penny.
Okay, so Rashad Penny was a bulletproof prospect in his draft year. He has great size at 5'11", 220. He was productive on the ground. He was productive through the air. He was basically everything that we're looking for. And he was crazy athletic. I can't remember what his speed score was, but it was in, I believe, the 90th percentile. So he's everything I'm looking for in a prospect. And then he went in the first round to a run-heavy team. So it seemed to just be a match made in heaven. And then Chris Carson got in the way. The thing with Rashad Penny is that so Rashad Penny lost value in year 1, which I've talked about is like basically a death sentence. Like, players just don't come back from losing value in year 1 ever. Buying low on a draft pick or on a rookie that lost value in year 1 is not a good bet. However, the few players that have turned into productive fantasy assets that did lose value look exactly like Rashad Penny. He's the only guy this year that, so there's 3 players this year that lost value after their rookie season: Royce Freeman, Ronald Jones, and Rashad Penny. When I looked at all the players that lost value and then regained value, they all had high draft capital, usually high in the first round, but definitely in the first round. They all were wildly successful in college on a college dominator basis, and they all were feature size, meaning good to great BMI. The players that were successful were guys like Ryan Matthews, Demaryius Thomas, Michael Floyd, Melvin Gordon, and Tevin Coleman. The only one that did not meet all 3 of those criteria was Tevin Coleman, who was a 3rd-round pick. Every other player that busted in year 1 that recovered, every player that busted in year one that had this criteria of high draft capital, high college production, and high or average to high BMI, every one of them hit. So he's not a guarantee to hit, but these guys have already paved the path. They've shown us that these players can hit. Guys like Ronald Jones, who is not a pass catcher and is not featured size, he's only in the 17th percentile. Like, guys like him just don't recover. Guys like Royce Freeman that were third-round picks and mediocre college producers don't recover. Guys like Rashad Penny that were first-round picks with a 98th percentile college dominator with a 58th percentile BMI. So without even looking at last year's stats, he looks impressive. Or he looks like he might have a chance. Then when you look at last year's stats, he was actually not that bad. Like, he wasn't bad in my opinion at all when he touched the ball. He just didn't get the ball because Chris Carson was in the way. But as we know, running backs get hurt. There's a good chance that, hopefully not Chris Carson gets hurt, but there's a good chance that he may get hurt. So I'd take the chance on Penny. They've also already said that it's a committee backfield this year between Penny and Carson. So that's a good indication. And for example, in 2018, Rashad Penny was RB15 in yards created per carry, which is basically the number one stat I look at when it comes to running backs. So he also had the number 6 breakaway run rate. Like, he was really good. Number 13 juke rate. He was really efficient when he actually touched the ball. He just didn't get to touch the ball. Hopefully he gets to touch it more this year.
Yeah, 100%. For me, obviously I was super high on Penny. Unfortunately, I sold him. I got a little scammed. I was in a super good mood. Got elected for a position in a college club. So I was super in a good mood. And some guy's like, "You want Chris Godwin?" And I'm like, "Who doesn't want Chris Godwin, Rod God?" And he's like, "Give me Cortland Sutton and Rashad Penny for Chris Godwin." And I'm like, "Woohoo! Best mood ever already!" And I hit accept. So I'm a little regretful of that trade, especially if you talking up Penny.
I'm not going to fault you for that trade.
I like Godwin though. Godwin's great. I think he could legit be like this year's Diggs, like finish as like a low end wide receiver 1, high end wide receiver 2. A little volatile with the games, but
yeah, I'm very into Chris Godwin. So another thing that I looked at was kind of looking at like second, third, and fourth round players and looking at if they boomed in year 1 and then they boomed again in year 2. The hit rates on those guys is incredible, and Chris Godwin did that. Like, it's really, really high.
That's awesome to hear.
Yeah, I own Chris Godwin in a lot of leagues, and I probably would have made that trade as well because I don't really think Cortland Sutton is gonna make her. He might, but I have my doubts. And Rashad Penny, well, I think if anyone can recover from having the slow start that he did and like the ADP drop in year 1, I think it's Rashad Penny, but it's still no guarantee. Like that year 1 ADP drop for a rookie is an absolute killer. It's incredible how infrequently players recover from that.
Yeah. Well, it's unfortunate because you're kind of banking on a Chris Carson injury for Rashad Penny to truly break out. Granted, they don't have Mike Davis, so he can kind of take on a Mike Davis role, but you're still going to be disappointed, really, really, really disappointed if, your first-round rookie pick, maybe top 5 rookie pick, frickin' just has a Mike Davis role there in Seattle, which wasn't bad because they ran it so much, but I think they're going to pass it more. So that could be good because he could catch more passes, but probably bad for the volume. Granted, Brian Schottenmeier or whatever it is, he likes to run it 50,000 times. And that's probably annoying if you're a DK Metcalf owner, a Tyler Lockett owner, some of those guys.
Russell Wilson owner.
Russell Wilson owners are probably pissed because you look at Wilson's just been so good and like, woohoo, Russell Wilson. And he honestly didn't It wasn't bad. It wasn't like you went, man, Russell Wilson sucks. But probably disappointed his ADP a ton. Just unexpected because he used to pass so much and run out in the pocket so much. And he didn't really scramble much. He didn't pass much either. It's just like, wow. Incredible. Incredible. No one saw that coming.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like Rashad Penny at this point, you're disappointed no matter what happens. But I think there's like a silver lining that he could be like an RB2 even with Carson healthy. Like if they run as much successfully as they did last year, Pete Carroll is true to his word that they're a committee this year. A 50% rushing share on that team is still probably RB2 worthy. And then if he gets the passing work over Chris Carson, he could have a very relevant season.
Yeah, I like him. I like all those backs. Honestly, in Seattle, kind of sucks they're both there. But moving on here, I kind of want to go from one committee to another. Probably with these poor offensive lines. I kind of want to know. We talked a little bit earlier, and you're kind of low on just the Denver Broncos backfield as a whole. You kind of don't like Lindsey. You kind of don't like Royce. You think one?
Yeah, I think the Denver Broncos backfield and the entire team, to be honest, is basically somebody has to produce, so somebody will. But I don't think there's any long-term holes on that team other than Noah Fant. Noah Fant is absolutely bulletproof. I have no doubts about him being successful in the NFL. Everyone else I have serious question marks about. Philip Lindsay is undrafted and tiny, and players like that disappear very quickly out of the NFL. Royce Freeman got beat out by a guy who's tiny and was undrafted, and guys who get beat out by tiny undrafted running backs typically are not going to have successful NFL careers, especially when he himself was only a third-round pick. And then Courtland Sutton, I think, I really liked Courtland Sutton until Trey Quinn went to SMU and outproduced them. And then Trey Quinn went in the 7th round of the draft. And it was like, the reason that I like these small school receivers that are so dominant is because they're so dominant. And then when you have a small school receiver who's not the most dominant on his team, that raises a lot of red flags, especially with Courtland Sutton's profile. He is an absolute physical specimen. He's huge and he's crazy athletic. And then he got outproduced by Trey Quinn. Doesn't make any sense. And then when he came into the NFL, I feel like he was not overly impressive from an efficiency standpoint. And I had drafted him in a bunch of places, and then I took that opportunity. As soon as they traded Demaryius Thomas, I went into my leagues, everyone that I own Courtland Sutton in, and I said, I basically just sold him for whatever I could get, which was a lot because there was a lot of hype for him at the time. But he didn't have an impressive rookie season from an efficiency standpoint. He did all right in counting stats. He had 700 yards, I think, but he wasn't impressive doing it, I guess.
That makes sense.
I don't really like any of the other players on the team.
I have a quick question.
More Fant or bust in Denver.
Yeah, I like Fant too. Would you rather have in kind of your tight end rankings? Who's higher for you? Is it Hawkinson or is it Fant? I'm just curious because I've had this debate too, and I'm just really curious what you think about that.
Depends on the day. I have them side by side in my rankings.
Okay, that's fair. Would you So my only concern with the tight ends while we're on this conversation is that they're not going to produce year one because you had OJ Howard. A little bit of a different situation, I guess, because Cameron Brate existed compared to these guys. These guys have probably less competition, especially Fant. But he didn't produce, and he was kind of a similar prospect. I think these guys are probably better. I think all three of those guys are close, though, and he didn't produce. But that's kind of my concern. And some of my fellow podcast members who aren't with us today, unfortunately, they were kind of like, Hawkinson, Fant, tight end 4 and 5. I'd rather have them over Hunter Henry, Evan Ingram, pretty much past those top three of Kittle, Ertz, and Kelsey. Where would you rank these tight ends, both of them, kind of in your consensus, kind of like top, just overall tight end rankings, where would they fall in?
I have them at 7 and 8. I do have Hawkinson over Fant, but if you ask me again tomorrow, I might change it.
Yeah.
So I have George Kittle, Travis Kelce, Zach Ertz, Evan Ingram, OJ Howard, Hunter Henry, and then Hawkinson and Fant, David Njoku, Mark Andrews. That's my top 10, and that's the end of my. That's the only guys I really care about.
Yeah. I think the tight ends are good to invest in if you understand their long term, because I think both these tight ends will hit. I think honestly both could be Hall of Famers. That's how much I like their profile. And
absolutely.
I do think for me, and you can go ahead and agree and disagree with me here, though, I think Fant will produce more year one. So if you're like a hardcore contender, I'd rather draft Fant over Hawkinson, because I think Hawkinson has more of a crowded situation with Marvin Jones, Kenny Golladay. You have Riddick catching passes, Carry-On can catch. Jesse James exists, not necessarily as the greatest tight end of all time, but he exists. He can take some work. They're going to be run heavy with Darrell Bevell, I believe is their offensive coordinator. Meanwhile, Fant, I think, could be their legitimate number one target. I think Deshaun Hamilton hype kind of falls down because Case Keenum is gone. It was kind of like the whole Deshaun Hamilton in the slot. Well, now it's Joe Flacco, who doesn't like the slot receiver as much. He likes his tight end and his big guys and his fast guys that throw the deep ball, right? So do you kind of agree with that thought process that you'd rather have Fant over Hawkinson if you're more of a contending team, and then maybe like Hawkinson if you're a rebuilding team? Or how do you kind of view that logic?
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think Fant's going to have a better rookie season. I don't think, I think if you're starting either guy in your starting lineup as rookies, you're not going to be having very much fun. I don't think either guy is going to be like a superstar out of the gate. I think they're both going to struggle, maybe 400 or 500 yards each.
That's pretty good production for year one, though.
Oh, it's great production. I think they're going to be Mark Andrews had 500 yards, and he was one of the top 10 or 15 producers in the last since 2000. So 400 or 500 yards is nothing to sneeze at, but it's just it's not really making a difference for your fantasy team. Yeah, it's not until they get to the 800 or more yards when you're like, hey, all right, I'm starting this guy with confidence. Perfect.
Yeah, I definitely think if you're starting those guys, he might not be as much of a contender as you think. But I think Fant's going to give you more immediate value compared to Hawkinson, because Hawkinson can block, and they're going to use him as a blocker, right? Meanwhile, Fant can also block, but he isn't a great blocker. So I feel like you'd be wasting Fant just having him block. Meanwhile, Hawkinson's going to actually be a really great blocker. You want Hawkinson to block.
Yeah, it actually really reminds me of the 2017 class. Noah Fant is basically Evan Ingram, and TJ Hawkinson's basically OJ Howard. That's kind of how I've been looking at it. At the time, I had Evan Ingram over OJ Howard because I felt like Evan Ingram was going to be used as a pass catcher from day one. And I guess similar this year, I feel like Fant is going to be used as a pass catcher. And then actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I don't like any of the Denver Broncos, so maybe Fant does have a really, really strong rookie season and is a quality fantasy starter in year one. So maybe you should take Fant over Hawkinson.
Hey.
I haven't been doing that, but I don't know.
Maybe I just talked you into something. Look at me go. Wow. There you guys go. I'm a little convincing somehow. Personally, I'm drafting more Hawk than Fant, but I got Fant in 202. I think it was 201 in a rookie draft, and I placed third that year. Granted, I had Kittle, but it was pretty much him or wait, hold on. I got this backwards. It was 206. I got him at 206 in a rookie draft, a 10-man league. And I was like, holy crap, I had to trade up from the third round, so I think I gave him 2/3 in Ian Thomas. I'm like, I don't care, give me Noah Fant. That's probably a lot for just that pick, but I'm like, it's Noah Fant, So he's sliding incredibly.
Yeah.
So
I have Noah Fant as the number 5 prospect in this class.
Yeah, I like the Titans too. And
I really would have been happy with where you got him.
I was ecstatic, dude. I'm like, I don't care if I overpaid for this pick according to some trade calculator. It's freaking Noah Fant. I'm like, sweet. I think I already have Kelsey in this league. I'm I'm set on tight end forever. Oh my god, I was so happy. Yeah, and I kind of want to keep up the tight end talk, and I'm going to kind of ask you like a double whammy here. So you're kind of high on Hunter Henry, and you're low on Mike Williams. Why do you think Hunter Henry will succeed, and why do you think Mike Williams will disappoint?
Hunter Henry, dating back to college, has been dominant from day one. He went into, like, as a sophomore, or a freshman, pardon me, he was dominant all through college. And then he got to the NFL, and he wasn't dominant because he was playing behind a Hall of Fame tight end, but he was crazy efficient and had an awesome rookie season. And then he had an okay sophomore season, and then he got hurt, and now here we are. So basically, he's never disappointed other than the season he was hurt, in my eyes. Like, he is basically as bulletproof as they come as his prospect, and then I feel like he's done everything he's been asked to do in the NFL. He's been efficient when called upon. Mike Williams, on the other hand, I was telling you about how the players that face plant in year one rarely recover. Mike Williams did get a bounce back of ADP this year, but he did lose a lot of ADP after his rookie season. He was basically non-existent, and I just think that he's not going to be a dominant asset in fantasy for the long term. He may have a good season or two based on his high draft capital, but I don't think that he's here for the long term. Hunter Henry, on the other hand, I absolutely believe is here for the long term. And more or less, they have to share the football. So I'm going to pick the better player, in my eyes, to get more of the football.
Yeah. For me, kind of the Chargers' offense is a little bit of a headache because you have Keenan Allen, Hunter Henry. Those are my two favorites from that offense. Then you have Mike Williams. You have Austin Eckler, Melvin Gordon. They both catch passes. Granted, I think what's his name? Mike. Wait, no, it's the other Williams. Tyrell Williams left, so that opens up a little bit of targets, which is good. You have Dylan Cantrell, who maybe does something, maybe not, probably not. But overall, there's just a lot of mouths to feed. And I feel like Mike Williams and Hunter Henry could both really kill each other's value, just because they're both there. They're both red zone threats. They both fill kind of similar roles. It's just a big-bodied target for Phillip Rivers. So that's my only concern, is that they both kind of kill each other's value. Unless Keenan maybe gets injured, which I'm not going to wood here. I don't want happening, obviously. But I don't know. One of them I think is going to bust. One of them is going to succeed. I think it's Hunter Henry, but I could be really, really wrong there. So.
No, I think the other thing to consider is that Mike Williams' value has skyrocketed. He still only had 664 yards last year. He didn't have a great season. From a yardage standpoint, he had an absolutely phenomenal season from a touchdown standpoint with 11. He was fourth in the entire NFL in receiving touchdowns. So, it just doesn't jive.
Yeah, and you're lower on touchdowns than most, as you've kind of strayed away from, like we mentioned earlier, the college dominator rating to the target share yards.
Yeah, I mean, basically, yes, exactly. Touchdowns, they're really difficult to repeat. There's a few guys that are obviously very good at touchdown specialists, but we just don't see it that frequently. Whereas we see the guys that pile up yards year over year over year being dominant. So I want the yards. The touchdowns are bonuses.
Yeah, touchdowns are volatile there, so I 100% agree. I kind of want to move on here, kind of talk a little bit off specific players, specific teams, and I want to talk a little bit about kind of dynasty strategy, maybe some advice you have for any newer Dynasty League owners, maybe some veterans who are experienced. And I kind of want to start it off with the rookie draft. Do you have any rookie draft tips, any kind of advice, maybe specifically this year, maybe just in general? Walk me through what you kind of think about when a rookie draft begins.
So basically what I'm looking to do, I've already done my scouting, obviously. I know which guys are my targets, so I want to acquire draft picks in that range. So this year I liked the tight ends, A.J. Brown and Andy Isabella, who are all kind of mid-first to mid-second ADPs. So if I couldn't get Kyler and Keel, who are my 1 and 2s, I would try to trade back and acquire future seconds, future thirds, whatever I could get to move back and take the guys I actually wanted. I don't really ever draft players unless I absolutely have to. I don't draft non-bulletproof players unless I absolutely have to. So I just try to manipulate the draft board as much as I can, moving up and down the draft board to acquire as many picks in the range of players that I can get. I rarely keep my 3rd and 4th round picks. I always use them to move up. I know a lot of people say that moving up is kind of a sucker play, but I don't feel that way in rookie drafts. I feel that way in startup drafts. I always trade down in startup drafts, but in rookie drafts, there's only 5 good players usually per class, so you just need to get those players. The other thing to consider is if you're not really confident in scouting, just don't pick the players that have bust profiles. Like the guys that you just can't understand how they can possibly be good. Just don't pick those guys.
Do you have an
Avoid
example?
drafting busts. Give you an example?
Yeah, give me an example. Of like this year's class.
Mecole Hardman, Paris Campbell, Deebo Samuel, DK Metcalf.
A lot of examples.
That's from this year. Years past, let me pull up last year. Last year, I would have had Ronald Jones on my do not draft list, Royce Freeman, Kerryon Johnson. Calvin Ridley, I was pretty confident wasn't going to be very good. I'm still pretty confident he's not going to be very good. Courtland Sutton, I was open to being good, but he just kind of face planted when he did have his chance, so I'm all out on Courtland Sutton. 2 years ago, we had Mike Williams. He was the big one. John Ross, I really wasn't overly into in the first round anyway.
Yeah.
3 years ago, we'd be looking at Laquan Treadwell, Josh Doxson, Corey Coleman, Sterling Shepard, Kenneth Dixon, Leonte Crew I really liked. He didn't work out. Devontae Booker would have been another one. Like, these guys just don't have either draft capital, they don't have production, they don't have size, they're missing something significant.
Yeah. I think maybe you were pretty accurate on that too, so I think people should really take that at face value. I think it's important to look at the track records. I mean, maybe like the worst ones that were wrong were like Mike Williams, which we already talked about, and Sterling Shepard. And those guys have been okay for fantasy, but they haven't been superstars, which is kind of Drew's point here, is that, if you're not in love with a guy, and if he has a high chance of busting, don't draft him. Just trade back for like a next year pick. Or I always have the mentality of try to trade back when you can. Because trading back is super important, because depth is super important as the Dynasty League gets bigger, as well as those are just assets you can use to package for something, to just be like a little throw-in piece, perhaps, to make a trade work out. So overall, I think that's a really good mentality. You also mentioned trading back kind of in Dynasty startups. Do you have any other Dynasty startup tips?
Acquire as many future draft picks as you can. I always try to trade back and acquire future first-round picks. It's the easiest time to get them because everyone still thinks their team's going to be awesome. They don't, you don't know what kind of pick you're getting when you trade for it, right? Because nobody has a team yet. And they also don't know what kind of pick they're trading away. So I just get as many as I can.
Yeah, it's definitely a lottery ticket.
So back up for 1 second. One guy I did miss on that I will miss on every single time his profile comes up is Michael Thomas in 2016. I didn't draft him, and I just been drafting him.
Yeah, you regret that. I mean, I think it's pretty high for me that year. Excuse the voice crack. Yeah, I definitely think he was pretty high for me this year. I liked it. Granted, Brandon Cooks was there, so I really can't blame many people for kind of fading that. Granted, it was Drew Brees, for Christ's sakes, who threw a ton back then. Now he doesn't throw as much. But Michael Thomas, probably a big miss, but that's okay, because I feel like a lot of people almost missed on Michael Thomas. And I just want to kind of give some proof to kind of how you talk about like trading for like these first round picks and like start up and trade back or maybe trade a selection. So I don't think it's very similar to that. And I drafted Saquon in the first round. I had a fair amount of busts though. I had Penny. I drafted Hunter Henry like right before his ACL tour, or I reached on him. I can't exactly remember. Mike Williams was good. I had Amari Cooper too, which isn't bad, but I ended up trading him when he was still in Oakland after he disappointed for what ended up being the 101, which is my own 2021 back. Anyways, by the end of this, I had like four 2019 firsts. I was able to really build those down. I traded a lot of those down, and I still managed to grab N'Keal Harry at 103, for example. So a whole bunch of value there. I pretty much just traded it down. So now I'm sitting here with a team in the lineup of Jameis Winston, Barkley, Fournette, Diggs, Galladay, Godwin, Hunter Henry, Miles Sanders, Josh Jacobs, and N'Keal Harry, and JJ Arcega-Whiteside, as well as I have 5 2020 firsts next year, which a couple of them seem to, I feel like pretty confident that 2 of them are going to be 101 and 102. And I just kind of wanted to back up Drew's point here with my own experience, because I feel like he could say it, but people might not believe it. I didn't even know Drew or followed him back when I did this, but I just wanted to give you some proof that this strategy does work. And this team honestly looks super really good. I'm super excited to build up this team with all those draft picks. It's going to be fun.
Absolutely. One other thing I would suggest that, like, I know. Okay, so when I started playing Dynasty, I was a youth chaser. And I still am to a degree, but like I was talking about how you can just kind of, like in a rookie draft, you can usually see the guys that are going to bust and just don't pick them. For example, dating back to 2007, 63% of all first-round picks either gained or maintained their value after their rookie year. So if you can, of the 12 players picked each year, if you can take 2 out of that sample, you have like a 70% safe rate. Like you're gaining or maintaining your ADP value on 70% of your picks if you can pick out the 2 busts and just not pick them. And then once you get these players that have boomed, after the boom, it's usually like your hit rate on picking the players that are going to be successful is so much higher. So like for an example, DJ Moore boomed last year. I'm 100% in on DJ Moore. Like I've been buying him everywhere. I've been trading very quality assets to get DJ Moore. And like the fact that his profile was so good and then he came into the NFL and impressed again is basically he's just automatically going to be awesome.
Yeah.
Whereas
DJ Moore, I like, so I agree.
Yeah, like it's just so much easier to project players once they're in the NFL, and when you combine it with their college profile, if their college profile is impressive and their first year in the NFL is impressive, they're probably going to be very successful. So don't be afraid of draft picks. I rarely trade away draft picks. I usually draft the players and then trade the draft picks and then trade those players later, because the ADP gain is almost always there, so you have an ascending value anyway. But yeah, more or less, don't be afraid of draft picks. Just make sure you're not drafting the guys with bust profiles.
For me, I think that's something really, really smart too. Because draft picks are going to bust, but we won't. Especially Drew tries to minimize that with the Bulletproof Prospect series, as he talked about earlier. He only really targets those guys, or he trades back, right? You want to be kind of sold because this is a long-term investment. Hopefully, you aren't leaving your league after a year. So I definitely 100% agree with that kind of philosophy there. I like it. And speaking of kind of a league here, kind of leagues in general here, I wanted to give you a shout out here for joining the SFB9 kind of league. Can you explain to our viewers what that's about and how you got invited?
Yeah, it's SFB9's the Scott Fish Bowl. It's I'm assuming the 9th year of it. I'm not certain how if it's actually the 9th year, if there was some that didn't have numbers before that. But basically, it is a charity league that Scott Fish puts on, and it's, I believe, 75% analysts typically, although I believe this year he's jumped the number of participants up to 1,500 from 900 last year, so maybe there'll be more fans in it this year. But basically, it's a chance to play against your favorite analysts. There's the big name people playing it as well, so it's pretty neat. The scoring settings, they normally change every year so that everybody has to learn new scoring settings each year. Though I believe this year Scott Fish had a tweet about keeping it similar, so we'll see how much different they are this year. But it's broken down into 12-team divisions, and then there's those divisions make up conferences, and then you have to win your division, and then you have to win your conference, and then you get to the finals eventually. Last year I did pretty well in it. I think I was in the top 150 or so. I'd have to go back and look, but I can't remember if I lost in the conference or the division finals. Didn't win, so we got something to work on for this year. Yeah, and it's pretty fun on Twitter, especially when it starts, because all of the drafts start at exactly the same time. So as the draft is progressing, you're seeing the ADP develop, so you can see where other people are taking the same players, taking the guys that you've taken, to see if you've been reaching or if your value is pretty similar to everyone else's in the league. It's a lot of fun right out of the gate, that's for sure.
That's awesome. Charity work, that's awesome as well. Just I don't know if everyone participating has to pitch in some money, but I think that's just an awesome cause. I wasn't invited to it. I'm no analyst yet. Those 15 Twitter followers, they're growing. But that's awesome. And I'll be rooting for you. You know what? I'll be your number one fan. I'll be like, Drew, let's go, Drew.
All right.
I'm sure you can top that off there. So that's awesome. I want to congratulate you. That's a big deal for those who don't know. This is an awesome league. And I know you're going to do well because you're going to draft your bulletproof guys. You're going to believe in your mentality, and that's super important there. So congratulations to you. That's awesome. So happy for you. That's honestly such a great league, too. Shout out to, I believe, Scott Fish for that. That's awesome. So.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. He did a podcast last year kind of talking about the origins of it. It was pretty neat. I don't remember a lot of the details, but it was certainly unique. Last year's was each division was based on a TV character. This year it's based on video game characters.
Oh, that's cool. I like the themes. But yeah, it's a lot of people. That's awesome.
I ended up in the Just Day division, who I did not know who that was. I had to look up who that was. I never saw the new girl before, but it turned out that I actually enjoyed the show, so I watched a couple seasons of it so far.
Look at the league. It's still in your favorites, man. It's showing your TV shows. That's actually pretty awesome. I'm not going to lie. It's awesome.
So we'll see who I get for a video game character. Maybe I'll be playing a video game soon to find out more about it.
Hey, the SFB9 League, teaching you more than fantasy football. So, dang, look at that. So that's going to pretty much wrap up anything I have to say. Is there anything maybe I didn't ask you about, anything else you want to talk about? We still have some time here, so I just kind of want to leave the floor open to you. Is there anything you kind of want to say, anything I missed, stuff like
that? No, not really. I think we covered most of the guys that you had wanted to talk about, so I think we're good.
Yeah, you gave me a list. When I opened the list, you gave me like 30 players to choose from, so I'm really appreciative of that. I picked ones personally I'm interested in, because if I'm interested in them, must mean other people are interested in them. So my final question here for you really is, where can people find you online, on social media, stuff like that, if they want to check out your work? I'm on Twitter at DFBeanCounter. I'm a real-life accountant, so real-life BeanCounter. All right, you guys, you heard that. Follow him on Twitter right now. Follow my man, Drew, at DFBeanCounter. That's at DFBeanCounter. I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your day here with me. This has honestly been such a great time here, and I'm super grateful here. We talked for a while here, over an hour, so this is going to give great content here. And honestly, I'm honored to have you as our first kind of guest here on the one-on-one interview here in the Fantasy Flavor podcast, because I honestly was kind of blown away with some of your answers. You talked about stuff I never heard about, like the market share for yards, which I'm still never going to get that down, but I know what it is. That's the important part. Thank you so much, Drew, for being on here today. I really, really do appreciate it. I'm going to let you go here now, but I want to thank our viewers so much for listening. We should have an episode up eventually. There's some real life stuff happening with a couple of my fellow co-hosts on the podcast. So I'll keep you guys updated on Twitter. So remember to follow me at the Fantasy Fellow. So that's at Fantasy Fellow. Actually, scratch that. It's at DKTom2018. Don't even know my own Twitter. So that's at DKTom2018. If you do want to just know when the next podcast episode is coming up, because I don't personally know. I'm going to try for next week. I'm going to talk to Trenton about it. We'll see. But thank you again, Drew. It was a great time having you on, and I really appreciate it. And for the viewers, have a fantastic rest of your day.